one of SABU this year, an organization dedicated to financial literacy that I think very much is in tune with the goals we have at SABU as an organization. So we're just delighted that they are sponsoring this session. Ted took up his duties at NEFI in 2005. He was formerly the Associate Dean of Executive Education and Corporate Relations at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, of the School of Business there. Under him, the school's previously unranked executive education program was ranked in the national top 20 by the Financial Times for 4 years in a row. Before coming to Wisconsin-Madison in 1999, he spent 20 years in senior management positions at Citibank and Citigroup. Ted is on the FDIC's Advisory Committee on Economic Inclusion, the board for the National Jumpstart Coalition for Financial Literacy, and most recently was appointed to the White House Council on Financial Literacy. So without further ado, let me introduce Ted Beck.
Thank you. I guess I'm also the unofficial welcome wagon from the city of Denver and that we're based here. I wish I would have known you were doing the auction because I have a sailboat that's been sitting in my driveway for 4 years since I moved to Denver. We don't do a lot of sailing here. A couple of things I'd just like to do quickly. I'd like to tell you very briefly about NEFI and just make a couple of observations about the changes in the coverage we've been seeing in consumer finance and financial behavior. NEFI is a nonprofit organization. It's based here in Denver. Our sole purpose is to improve the financial capability of all Americans. So we fund research, we sponsor programs, and we partner with organizations of a like mind. I can assure you we have no commercial intent. We have our own money that funds what we do, which is a great luxury these days, and everything we do, we give away. So in discussing about our sponsorship of SABU, the synergy between the two organizations was very strong, and that's one of the reasons we're so pleased to be here. When Bernie introduced me, I saw a couple of people cringe and when you mentioned Citibank, and I also saw some of my former colleagues in the video. I want to assure you when I left, the patient was alive and was doing well. And I must tell you, last week I was visiting my father, who is about to turn 90, who is a retired banker, who has been following everything you just saw with great interest. And he had one question of me. And he said he really thought I should try to see if I now qualify for a federal pension. And that 20 years at Citibank might now qualify for a pension program. Just a couple of quick things I'd like to do before I introduce the first panel. When I was at Citi, we did something that I was always very amazed and confused by. We tried to make personal finance and finance in any way complex. We loved to make it sound like you really had to be a genius to do this. And that always puzzled me, because I always thought we should try to make this simple and logical so that consumers and companies around the world could understand what we were trying to do. And when I left corporate life and went to academic life, I was hoping to find clarity and some people trying to simplify finance. Instead, I found complexity with statistical regression analysis. In other words, nobody wanted to make this simple. And when I came to NEFI 4 years ago, I found that there was very limited research around personal finance and the issues that the American public is facing today. And one of the things I really want to congratulate you on is the transition over the last 4 years. This has been a very difficult time. And one of the things that I'm most pleased to say is there has been great development in research around what's going on, what are the issues around personal finance, and also the reporting has started to try to explain things to people. And that's a result of your efforts, and that's one of the things that we were most encouraged by, and one of the reasons we wanted to be supportive of your visit here to Denver, which, by the way, is a great place to live. Now, I would like to introduce the subject of the first panel. And I really want to make sure I get this exactly right. When I saw this as a subject, I would have gladly rolled down the hill, because I just live very close by, and tried to sneak in to hear this, even if we weren't sponsors. And its coverage of the meltdown did 9,000 business journalists blow it. And I think that's going to be a fascinating topic. And the moderator, Paul Steiger, I think is well known to all of you with his 16 years as managing editor of the Wall Street Journal. And so I'd like to introduce Paul, and he will introduce the first panel. Paul?
Good afternoon. Great to see you all. And I think we've got a great panel to discuss this very interesting and issue, which I'm sure is of intense interest to all of you. As I mention each of the panelists, would you come up and take a seat? Any seat will be fine, please. I'm going to do this in alphabetical order, but I had to make a decision about Jane because I wanted to make her first, so I went with Bryant instead of Quinn. Jane Bryant Quinn is the Dean of Personal Finance Writers and Commentators. We've all read her stuff for a long time. She writes columns in Newsweek. She writes for Bloomberg. She gives speeches and talks. And somehow along the way, she's managed to cope with 5 kids. Jane?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Second, Alan Dodds Frank. Alan, either of your names puts you second. Alan is a good friend of mine. He's a longtime television financial investigative journalist, which makes him a relatively rare animal. He's worked for ABC, CNN, and Bloomberg. He's got 2 Emmys and a Loeb. Alan, please come up. Third is Larry Ingrassia. I worked with Larry for many years at the Wall Street Journal, where he was one of the journal's stars as both a reporter and as an editor. He was bureau chief in Minneapolis, Boston, and London. He also ran the money and investing section, and then he jumped over to the New York Times, where he has been a dramatically successful leader. Under his leadership, the Times' coverage of business, which has always been good, has really surged forward. Larry? Fourth is Greg Miller, who has promised not to do any multiple regressions while he's up here. He's a professor at the University of Michigan. Before that, he spent 10 years at Harvard Business School, and he focuses on what makes for effective communication, and he's also examined some of the things that went wrong in business and perhaps the coverage of business. Greg? And last is Dean Starkman. Dean worked for 8 years at the Wall Street Journal, covering real estate, all kinds of real estate, but with heavy focus on commercial. Before that, he worked as a journalist in Providence, where he was on a Pulitzer Prize-winning team for investigative reporting. Now he is ensconced at Columbia University, where he is doing the audit, which, as most of you know, I'm sure, is a online criticism service that critiques what you all do. Dean?